Okay, let's unpack this. Ever have one of those mornings where you just, well, can't seem to get out of bed? Now imagine that, but it's not just reluctance, you physically can't, because you've somehow, like, turned into a giant insect.
Yeah, it's quite the premise.
That's the starting point for the text we're diving into today, Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis from back in 1915.
And what's so striking is how it just happens. No explanation. We're just thrown in. Gregor Samsa wakes up and boom, he's horrible vermin.
As the text puts it, yeah, stark.
That suddenness is really key, isn't it? He just shatters his world and, of course, his family's too.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we've got a really useful selection from the story. You've shared the whole first chapter, quite a bit of the second, and then, well, the start and the very end of chapter 3.
Right.
So our goal, our mission, if you like, is to really get a handle on the core narrative here. Gregor's initial, well, mind-bending transformation, maybe some basic interpretations, and the immediate, like, seismic shockwaves for him and the family, all based on the text you've got.
Exactly. This selection lets us really dig into that initial shock and the eventual fallout without getting lost in every single detail.
Yeah.
It's about getting the essence of this, well, truly weird and thought-provoking story.
So, chapter 1. It just drops us right in. Gregor wakes up, not a man anymore, horrible vermin. The descriptions are just so visceral, armor-like back, brown belly, these like pitifully thin legs just waving around.
Yeah, completely out of his control.
And it's not a dream. This is it, his new reality. But what's weird is how he struggles just to get out of bed even while he's internally freaking out. It's bizarre.
Well, that immediate physical helplessness, it tells you so much, doesn't it?
Oh, so?
It's like this grotesque transformation instantly strips him of all agency.
Yeah.
You know, he was the provider, the one supposedly in charge of his life.
Right.
And now he can't even roll over properly. His body is alien. It won't cooperate. It's a really brutal picture of lost autonomy right from page 1.
And yet, even in this completely bonkers situation, his first thoughts are so mundane, almost disappointing, you know?
Yeah, it's incredible.
He's obsessing about his job, traveling salesman, the pressure, paying off his parents' debt.
The
He even thinks about wanting a big change in 5 or 6 years. The irony is just painful.
Oh, absolutely.
This clash, the fantastical transformation versus his, like, totally ordinary worries, it's quite something.
It really is. It shows how, even when faced with something utterly off the wall, our ingrained routines and anxieties just stick.
Right.
His worries about work, money, they're like an anchor to his old life. Even though the life is now physically impossible for him, it makes the unreal feel strangely relatable in a way.
And he clearly wasn't happy with that old life, was he? He talks about the curse of traveling, shallow relationships.
Right, and seeing other salesmen living this life of luxury, there's bitterness there.
Definitely. And it's revealing, isn't it, how he dreams of telling his boss off, but then immediately thinks of the debt and shuts down. What does that tell us about him before all this?
I think it paints a picture of a life already lived under, well, serious constraint, dominated by obligation, suppressing his own wants.
Yeah.
His job wasn't fulfilling. It was just a means to an end, a burden, really, carried for the family. So this feeling of being trapped, it was already there. It's a crucial backdrop to his later physical trap.
Then the family starts reacting. Cautious knocking, calling his name. Mother, father, sister.
Understandably confused, concerned.
He tries to reply, but his voice, it's changed. This awful squeaking sound he can't control.
Unintelligible.
He's almost glad he always locked his doors. But that voice change, it feels like more than just physical, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Losing your voice, your ability to communicate clearly, that's profound isolation right there.
Yeah.
It cuts him off immediately, fundamentally. And their hesitation, the knocking, it suggests worry, sure, but also maybe this growing fear about what's actually behind that door.
His attempts to get out of bed are almost slapstick, but also just awful.
Tragicomic is a good word for it.
Flailing, legs everywhere, no coordination. He slides, falls out with this thud, realizes how sensitive his underside is now. You just feel the frustration, the helplessness.
That's raw.
That physical struggle, it really highlights a deeper loss, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. Losing control of his own body like that, it's a stark symbol of his lost status, his lost power in the family. He was the one who moved, provided. Now, just moving is this huge ordeal. His role is physically diminished.
And then the doorbell.
Ah, yes. The chief clerk.
Instant dread for Gregor. And his internal thoughts are just scathing, aren't they? Real resentment for the company, the suspicion, the lack of trust.
Why send the chief clerk? Why not an apprentice?
Exactly. He feels undervalued even before turning into a bug. Why do you think Kafka put so much emphasis on the work stuff?
Well, it underlines the dehumanizing aspect of his job, being just a cog. The clerk isn't there out of concern for Gregor's health.
No way.
He's there because Gregor missed the train, because productivity's down. It highlights those societal pressures Gregor was already buckling under.
Then we get this excruciating conversation through the locked door.
Painful to read.
Parents making excuses, getting weaker, the clerk getting angrier, talking about poor performance, threatening his job.
Yeah, laying it on thick.
And Gregor panicking, trying desperately to explain, making these pathetic promises about catching the next train. It's just chaos, complete misunderstanding.
It really shows that growing gap, doesn't it, between Gregor and the human world. His words, his reasoning, they're just noise to them now.
Alienation.
Exactly. Not just physical, but social, emotional. He's not understood anymore. He's outside their reality.
So finally, desperately, he gets to the door, turns the key with his mouth, opens it, collapses.
And the reaction.
Pure horror from the chief clerk. Mother faints. Father looks hostile, starts weeping. Gregor's just bewildered, wants to explain, but can't. It's devastating.
Yeah, that's the moment the shock starts turning into something else, something darker.
How so?
The horror, the disgust. It signals this fundamental shift in how they see him. He's not just their son, their brother, having a bad day. He's monstrous, alien.
And the chapter ends with that brutal act from the father. Using the clerk's stick, a newspaper, literally forcing Gregor back into the room.
Driving him back.
Injuring him as he struggles through the doorway. Then slam, lock. It's shockingly violent, so isolating. That act by the father feels huge.
Oh, it is. It's a powerful symbol of their rejection of this transformed Gregor. Using those tools, the clerk's stick, the newspaper, symbols of authority, the outside world, it's like they're trying to force him back, reassert control, push him back into confinement. It's a primal lashing out at something they just can't grasp or accept.
So chapter 2 starts. Gregor wakes up. It's dark. He's in pain from the injury. One leg's badly hurt.
Yeah, a grim continuation.
But he's also noticing his antenna, how important they are now for figuring out his space.
That focus on sensory adaptation, like relying on antenna, it shows him desperately trying to cope with this new physical reality. But the darkness, the pain, constant reminders of the violence, the confinement.
And then there's the food, or the attempt at food. Milk and bread, sweetened milk used to be his favorite.
Right.
But now, it repulses him. Such a small detail, but it says so much, doesn't it, about how deep this change goes.
It really does. Rejecting something familiar like that, it underlines how alienated he is. The physical change mirrors this change in his basic instincts, separating him even further from his old self and from what his family understands.
He starts watching them through the crack in the door, their usual evening routines.
Yeah.
Gone. Just silence.
Unsettling.
He feels this weird mix of pride, remembering he used to provide for them, and this gnawing worry about their future now. The whole dynamic is just flipped.
That shift is dramatic, isn't it? From active provider to passive observer. His old sense of responsibility is still there, but it crashes against his total helplessness now. Creates this huge internal conflict.
Then his sister, Greet, makes the first attempt at care.
Tentative steps.
Very hesitant, rushed, almost clinical, using a rag to handle the bowl. Brings him leftovers, stuff he probably can't even eat properly.
Right, a real mix. Scraps.
But surprisingly, he does eat some of it. And seems to heal physically quite quickly from the doorway injury anyway. So that initial care, however clumsy, it suggests maybe a little hope.
It does, but it's fragile hope, maybe. Her actions show duty, yes. But the way she does it, the unsuitable food, it hints at this underlying discomfort. She doesn't really get his new needs.
And that glimmer doesn't really last, does it? The feeding becomes routine, mechanical.
Devoid of connection, yeah.
Parents avoid him completely. Greet's care gets more and more perfunctory. And Gregor can't communicate, can't say thanks, can't explain what he actually needs. He just lies there, listening to them, worrying constantly about money.
It's a stark shift in Greet's behavior.
What do you think drives that?
Well, maybe the initial shock wears off, and the sheer reality of it sinks in. The burden of caring for him, day in, day out, plus the money worries. It probably leads to exhaustion, weariness, and emotional withdrawal.
And we learn more about those money worries. The father reveals they actually had some savings left over from his business collapse.
Which Gregor didn't know about.
Right, and Gregor feels the stab of guilt, regret. Why didn't they use that to pay off debt sooner? Maybe he wouldn't have had to work himself to the bone.
Hindsight, yeah.
Painful.
Now they're forced into serious penny pinching. The maid's fired. Mother and sister have to take on work. Selling jewelry. It's grim.
A family under immense pressure.
How does that financial stuff isolate Gregor even more?
Well, their focus just shifts entirely, doesn't it? From Gregor's condition to their own immediate survival, he becomes peripheral, a burden, an obstacle to them getting back on their feet. It just reinforces his feeling of uselessness. And Gregor himself seems to be changing inside. Shame, regret. He spends nights scratching the sofa, staring out the window. His senses seem duller.
Yeah, diminishing perception.
His sister keeps moving the chair near the window for him. It's this small, repeated action. Hard to know what it means. Is it care? Or just habit? Or making space?
It's ambiguous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe his attempt to find some routine, some distraction in his confinement, the fading senses just isolate him more within himself and the chair. Maybe it's the tiniest acknowledgement of his presence, a routine gesture, but without real engagement.
Great's discomfort around him just grows, though. She has to fling the window open the second she enters, even when it's freezing. Gregor gets scared, shivers.
That reaction is telling.
He starts covering himself with a sheet, and she just accepts it, doesn't comment. Is that understanding? Or just her wanting to avoid looking?
It feels more like the latter, doesn't it? Her revulsion is growing. She can't reconcile this creature with her brother. The sheet becomes this symbolic barrier, Gregor trying to hide, the family trying not to see.
Then the mother suddenly decides she has to see Gregor.
After avoiding him for so long.
Which leads to this big conflict with Greet about clearing out his furniture.
Ah, yes, the furniture scene.
The mother clings to this idea that the familiar surroundings are crucial, that keeping the room the same might help him turn back human. A hope Gregor seems to share, actually.
Right, he overhears and agrees.
But Greet argues, no, clear it out. Give him space to crawl like the insect he is now. It's such a poignant split in how they see him or want to see him.
It really highlights their different coping mechanisms, doesn't it? The mother desperately clinging to the past, hoping for reversal. The sister trying to deal with the present reality, but based on her interpretation of his insect needs.
So they try moving the furniture. It's difficult. Heavy chest of drawers. And Gregor, in this sudden surge of emotion, attachment to his old life.
He tries to intervene.
Yeah, specifically about his writing desk. He clings to the wall near that framed picture of the woman in furs he cut out.
A link to his past, his identity.
And the mother sees him on the wall, lets out this piercing scream, faints, just collapses. So intense.
His action, trying to save the desk. It's a desperate grab for a piece of his humanity, isn't it?
Yeah.
The desk represents his work, his mind, his contribution. And the mother's reaction, it's the raw shock, the devastation of seeing him like that, still attached to his past, but in this monstrous form.
And the chapter ends in more chaos. Great frantically looks for smelling salts for the mother, drops a bottle, it breaks.
An accident.
And Gregor gets splinters, gets hurt by the caustic medicine accidentally. He's shut out of the living room again. Just anxiety, self-reproach, another moment of isolation, unintended harm.
That accidental injury just underscores his vulnerability, right? And how the family's desperate attempts to cope keep backfiring, keep hurting him. Being locked out again just reinforces his isolation, his sense of being the source of all their pain.
So, chapter 3. It opens with that really grim image.
Yeah.
The apple, still stuck in his back from when his father threw it at him earlier.
Unremoved. Festering.
A constant reminder of the injury, and also, the text says, a reminder to the family of their duty to be patient, even though they're repulsed.
It's such a potent symbol, that apple. The wound in Gregor, yes, but also the festering wound in the family itself, the damage to their relationships.
And Gregor's much weaker now, can barely move. He spends his evenings just watching them. From the dark of his room through the open living room door, purely a passive observer now.
His reduced mobility, the passive watching, it highlights how marginalized he's become. The distance between him and their lives just keeps growing.
And their lives are now just quiet, weary resignation. Father wears his bank messenger uniform constantly, even at home. A symbol of his regained status, maybe?
Or clinging to some kind of order, perhaps.
Mother sews constantly. Greatad studies shorthand and French, trying to get a better job. Even the father, stubbornly refusing to go to bed, feels like part of this collective exhaustion. Their whole world reshaped.
Yeah, those altered routines really underscore how deep and lasting the impact is. They're all carrying new burdens. Their evenings are about quiet work now, not connection.
Money's still tight, so the regular maid is gone. They hired this huge, robust charwoman.
Yes, the charwoman.
And she's different, not really repelled by Gregor. She talks to him, even, though she calls him names like old dung beetle.
It's bizarre, isn't it? Almost darkly funny in a way.
What does she bring to the dynamic, do you think?
She's a stark contrast to the family's reaction, right? Her bluntness, her almost indifference. It highlights Gregor's reduced status, maybe reflects a kind of broader societal indifference. Her nicknames are insulting, yeah, but also suggest this weird, unempathetic familiarity.
Meanwhile, Gregor's basically stopped eating.
Almost completely.
At first, it seemed linked to the state of his room, which has become this dumping ground for junk now.
Right, after they take in the lodgers.
Yeah, they rent out a room to these 3 demanding guys with beards, and Gregor's room just becomes storage. That feels like another level of degradation.
Oh, definitely. Turning his room into a junk room is like the ultimate symbol of him being marginalized. He's not even a person in the house anymore, just an unwanted object shoved in a corner. And the loss of appetite probably reflects his physical and emotional decline.
He watches the lodgers eating their formal dinners, silently, longing for real food. It's such a painful contrast.
It really emphasizes that his basic human needs, his desires, they're still there. Even though he can't fulfill them, the gap between his existence and their comfort just highlights his deprivation.
Then that evening, Greet plays the violin.
Ah, the music scene.
She plays in the kitchen, initially for the lodgers. But Gregor hears it, and he has this incredibly intense emotional reaction, forgets his shame, his condition, just drawn towards the sound, a flicker of connection to his old self.
It's such a powerful moment. It reminds us that despite everything, the physical change, he still has that emotional core, that connection to beauty, to art. The music, something he valued associated with his sister, it breaks through the isolation for a second, rekindles something human.
But the lodgers, not impressed.
No. Bored. Annoyed, even.
They abruptly announce they're leaving because of the repugnant conditions, won't pay rent, threaten legal action.
Which is devastating for the family, obviously.
And their reaction is so harsh.
It really acts as the catalyst, doesn't it? For the family's final break with Gregor, their disgust, the financial threat. It just pushes the family over the edge, solidifies the idea that Gregor's presence is unbearable, has real-world consequences.
The family's in shock, despair, and then Greet, the sister who showed that early, fragile kindness. She just snapped.
It's brutal.
She declares, forcefully, heartbreakingly, they can't live with this monster anymore. She insists it's not Gregor, they have to get rid of it. It seals his fate, really.
That declaration is the final cut.
Yeah.
The sister, the last potential link, explicitly rejects him. It echoes the family's total alienation, their need to be free, and insisting it isn't Gregor. That's the complete dehumanization.
Gregor hears all this, painfully, slowly, turns around, crawls back to his room. The family just watches, silent, chilling.
The silence is heavy.
He makes it back inside. Greet rushes over, locks the door. Relief washes over her face.
Palpable relief.
And Gregor, he realizes he can't move anymore. The physical pain fades. His last thoughts are of his family. And he dies. Just as the clock strikes 3 a.m., it's so quiet, almost anticlimactic after everything.
His death isn't portrayed as this tragedy they mourn, is it? It's a release.
Wow.
For him, maybe, but definitely for them. Yet his final thoughts are of them, despite everything that underlines his enduring humanity, maybe. The quietness contrasts so much with the drama that led up to it.
The charwoman finds him the next morning, lifeless. Announces it, very matter-of-factly.
Look, kick the bucket. Something like that.
Yeah. And Great looks at the body, notes how thin he was, how he hadn't eaten. And that's where our deep dive, based on the text you shared, ends, leaves us thinking about what happens next for the Samsas.
The charwoman's casual discovery really highlights how insignificant he'd become by the end. And Greet's observation about his body, it underscores the physical toll of the isolation, the neglect.
So just to wrap up what we've talked through, this unbelievable transformation, the instant chaos and challenges for Gregor and his family, and then that slow, tragic decay of their bonds from shock and maybe some concern to resentment, and finally just this desperate need to be free of him.
Yeah, the excerpts trace this really harrowing path of alienation. Shows how fragile human connection can be when faced with something so utterly strange, so unbearable.
Which brings us to a final thought, maybe, for you listening to mull over. Looking just at these parts of the story we discussed, what does Gregor's metamorphosis really represent? Is it just this bizarre physical event? Or could it be, I don't know, a stand-in for deeper anxieties, societal pressures, personal failings, things already bubbling under the surface?
It raises huge questions, doesn't it? about identity, responsibility, the limits of empathy. Is it literal but symbolic? Or is the whole grotesque thing a metaphor for an alienation that was already there, maybe made worse by the pressures of work, family duty?
It's definitely food for thought. The text you've given us offers so much more to unpack on those themes. Isolation, obligation, the shifting power dynamics in that family under extreme stress. We'd really encourage you to go back to these excerpts from the Metamorphosis, think about these elements further.
It's one of those stories, isn't it? Stays with you, keeps provoking questions long after you finish reading.